You're very welcome to Treaty Talk episode 138. Myself, Jack Neville, and Matt O'Callaghan of the Weekly Observer and Fail Star. A bumper weekend of action, Matt. We have the senior footballers in their crucial clash against Wicklow. We have both camogie teams in action, and we also have the return of the ladies footballers, so do stay tuned.
The impression the game you get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Matt, I suppose there's nowhere better to start than in Aughrim this Saturday, tomorrow, with the footballers travelling there to take on Wicklow in round 3 of Division 3 South of the National Football League. It's a crucial tie. You don't quite know, is it winner take all with all the permutations ahead, but we have the team for that crucial tie against Wicklow. There's only one change in the team. It's not Ian Corbett. It is Adrian Enright is in instead of Tony McCarthy. Ian Corbett goes back to centre-back where we know him so well. Robbie Childs moves to wing-back. Brian Donovan has gone out to the centre and Killeen Fahy has gone to full forward. I suppose looking at that team, Matt, and obviously it's a crucial game, as I said. What's the thoughts going into that game? Or have I lost Matt? Just so I'll just go through the team in full there. I'll wait Matt to come back. Donald Sullivan in goals, Sean O'Dea cornerback, Brian Fanning at fullback, and Michael Donovan then is in the corner. Robbie Childs, as I said, at wing back. Robbie has been at centre back for each of the games thus far. And Ian Corbett comes back in the centre back where we know him so well, but will he play there is another question. And then you have Gordon Brown as the other wing back. Derek Tracy and Tommy Childs continue in midfield. Keane Sheehan is at wing forward. Brian Donovan has gone to centre. He's played in the corner and at half forward so far this year. Adrian Enright comes into the team at half forward in the place of Tony McCarthy, as I said. Danny Neville is in the corner, Hugh Burke's in the other corner, and Killian Fahy moves full forward. Matt, you're back with us. I'm just saying, what's your thought going into this game against Wicklow with so many permutations on the line?
Yeah, of course, there are multiple permutations depending on the outcome. I suppose rarely have we travelled to Aughrim for a more important game. I was just looking back during the week on our record against Wicklow, which by any standard in this millennium anyway is pretty healthy. Like we have played them, is it 8 times or 9 times in this millennium alone. We've won 5, we've lost 2. There has been one draw, and of course there has been the infamous one back in 2018 when it was snowed off and couldn't be refixed, and when it had no bearing on the promotion at the end of the season. The game was eventually awarded to Wicklow, and then of course in 2019 we went there, played against a very, very strong breeze in the first half, strong wind actually, gale, and we're only 2 or 3 points adrift at half time and contrived to lose the football match. So it's been a checkered record with Wicklow in the last couple of games, and of course Wicklow have lost 2 games, Jack, but believe it or not, one of the permutations that is still there is that Wicklow could possibly still qualify.
Yeah.
Where Offaly to beat Tipperary and Wicklow to beat Limerick, they'll all end on 2 points. So it will come down to scoring difference. So let's dismiss that one for straight away, that Wicklow have nothing to play for. They have. But it's a huge game for Limerick in that, I suppose, very, very good performance, confidence high after the win over Tipperary, and then to go to Offaly. But there is a sense, and I wasn't in Offaly now, but speaking to people that were in Offaly, a sense that possibly on the day, first of all, that Offaly were probably the better side slightly on the day, but that Limerick maybe didn't do themselves justice to some degree. And like they just have got to pick it up very, very quickly again now and go again on Saturday at 3 o'clock in Aughrim. And against the Wicklow side, who conceded 5 goals the last time these counties met in McNeville Park. It was a goal fest. And a lot of course, the narrative that day was it was a day when everything went right for Limerick in front of goal, because they went to Antrim the following week and created as many chances and came away with just 1 goal and the defeat. So I wouldn't be reading too much into that, but it will be a motivating factor for Laois. For Wicklow. They will have that uppermost in their minds, because you must remember that they got promoted with Limerick, and looking back on their campaign, they will see that as the game that defined who were the Division 4 champions last year. It's going to be a very, very tough game for Limerick. Wicklow, all right. Aughrim is a very, very, very difficult place to go, and teams have found that out, not just in the league but in the qualifiers of the championship and in the Leinster Championship. And a number of teams have found it to be a fortress. And like Limerick are up against it. All right, Wicklow have lost 2 games. They pushed Offaly very close in Aughrim, as you'd expect, but they gave a very good account of themselves in Tipperary last week, and it was against the Tipperary side that were wounded and were smarting and wallowing on the defeat of Limerick the previous week, and it was a game to stay in contention that Tipperary simply just had to win, but Wicklow pushed them very, very closely. So Limerick are going to get nothing easy in Aughrim this weekend.
Yeah, certainly not. And just to run through the permutations, Offaly topped the table with 4 points and a score difference of 6. Offaly know that a win is good enough for them. They're guaranteed to go into the semi-finals with a win.
Avoid defeat even is enough.
Yeah, avoid defeat, yeah. Limerick are currently in second with a goal difference of 0 ahead of Tipperary, who are +1. But if Limerick and Tipperary both finish on 2 points, if they both finish 2 points, Wicklow will come into it. So essentially, a Limerick win will get them onto 4 points. If Tipperary get onto 4 points, it'll come down to scoring difference between Offaly, Tipperary and Limerick. Limerick could lose to Wicklow. That would put Wicklow on 2 points. And if Tipperary lose, Wicklow, Limerick and Tip would all be on 2 points as well. So as Pat was rightly mentioning in his article this week that's available on the website, every single score in Aughrim will be very, very important to both sides, and equally so with Tip against Offaly. But just on the game against Offaly, I thought Offaly did very well. They had their homework done. They snifled out that Limerick attack. And in Aughrim, it's going to be equally difficult. So how will Limerick go about getting their scores, which came that bit easier in the Gaelic rounds the first week, do you think?
Yeah, obviously they had their homework done, because they negated the threat, and there's no doubt about it. But the full forward line that Limerick have named for this week, it definitely carries threat. But the question is to get it into there. Now I see that Ian Corbett is named at centre half back, and that there's been a bit of tweaking there in defence with Robbie Childs going to the wing. I look. They just have got to get it into the scoring forwards very, very quickly, into the finishers very, very quickly. Those in the full forward line. Yeah,
and coming down to the game then itself, like I know it must be very difficult for Billy Lee and his side to prepare for a game that a lose could be as good as a win, just depending on what happens in the other game. But how do you go into a game like that, where you generally go into every game to win, but how do you prepare for a game where a win could put you into relegation and a loss could bring you into promotion?
I think you banish all thoughts of anything other than a win. I think there is no other way that you can prepare for the game, and I don't think that Billy Lee will be looking into any contingencies whatsoever this week in advance of the game, other than to go out and win the football match. I think that's exactly that will be the sole focus. I don't think that the other permutations will come into it, because the simple fact of the matter is all Limerick can control. They cannot control what happens between Offaly and Tipperary. All they can control is their own performance and how they do in Wicklow. Everything else is immaterial. Go out and win the match and see where it takes them. And that will be the focus this week. And that's how he will be preparing his side, I presume.
Yeah, and there's no doubt Billy's side will be fully focused on getting the win. If they are to get the win, Matt, where will the game be won and lost, you think, in such a difficult venue such as Aughrim?
Well, you alluded to it there earlier, that we weren't getting the scores as freely against Offaly as we did against Tipperary, and I think the middle third will have to provide the platform for our finishers to get the scores that will take us over the line.
And can you see that happening on Saturday?
I'm very, very hopeful, Jack. I'm an eternal optimist. I think Limerick can get over the line on it, that they'll just about shade it.
And if you were to catch your eye then to the other game between Offaly and Tip, which will have a huge bearing on the Limerick game, how do you see that one ending?
That's a very, very hard one to call. You would have to say, on going on the forum so far in the league, you would have to say that Offaly are favourites, and strong favourites, because they've won both games and they're at home. But it's not as simple as that. There has to be something. Like Tipperary were Munster football champions 4 or 5 months ago. They played in the All-Ireland semi-final, coughed up early goals, but really came back into it in the second half. They're still a very, very strong team. Now, I know they're without a number of their frontline players, but I wouldn't be surprised at all, Jack, if Tipperary got a result in Offaly.
Yeah,
the stakes are so high now that Tipperary are quite capable of getting a result in Offaly.
Yeah, it's probably a vindication to the GA to split the divisions into two to reduce the risk of COVID, but every team has something to play for, which makes it all the more exciting. But we're fully hopeful for a Limerick win here. Again, they're playing Wicklow in Aughrim tomorrow, Saturday at 3 p.m. That game is live on Jago, as the last two games have been. We're hopeful for that Limerick win. Obviously, this weekend we don't have any hurlers in action. And I suppose after 3 weekends without a win, it's probably a welcome break for John Kiley and his side.
Yeah, it's a welcome break, but it's a second win in a row now, which is something new for us. We have been spoiled over the last number of years, but John Kiley will have taken a lot of positives, and in his post-match interview, he was far from despondent on Sunday. You know, when we were speaking about this game here last week, Jack, and you posed the question, who was it a bigger game for? And I think we were in total tally and agreement that it was a bigger game for Waterford, and that's how things transpired. Because Waterford's record against Limerick since 2015 has been nothing, Jack, short of abysmal. And you know, they needed to turn it around, and Limerick started so promisingly, very, very, very promisingly, and it looked as if business as usual, more of the same, all that sort of stuff. But and even after the sending off of Seamus Flanagan, Limerick looked as if they could still see it out until Waterford found the spurt that they showed in the All-Ireland semi-final last year against Kilkenny. They produced something similar in the last quarter. And of course, they got the last quarter off to the best possible start when Stephen Bennett delivered right into the square. Jack Fagan went up high into the air, plucked it over the heads of everybody, and somehow hooked the ball into the net for the game's only goal. Now, that was the first goal, by my record anyway, that Nicky Quaid has conceded in the league. And he certainly couldn't be to blame for it, because it was from less than 2 or 3 yards. But that gave Waterford the momentum and the drive. And even though they were playing against 14 players, they still really struggled to see it out. Like when you think going into injury time that Limerick were just 2 points behind, it was 2 points in injury time by Patrick Curran and Bennett that really put Waterford into the comfort zone. So, like, factoring in that it was away from home, factoring in the fact that Limerick were played 40 odd minutes with 14 players. I think it was a very, very I thought it was a promising performance, Jack, and I think the momentum is starting to build ahead of the championship. And I say the championship now because it is the championship. We are out of the league. I don't think there's any mathematical permutation whatsoever that will allow Limerick to have further interest in the destination of league honours. I don't think it's possible. So it's a question now of all hands on deck now as we gear up for the July date with Cork. Now it's going to be a very, very tricky assignment, and I presume we'll be talking about it next week. Is the game? What do you do in the game against Cork without showing your hand too much? Now Cork will be faced with the same dilemma because I'm quite sure that I know for absolutely certain that that there's one piece of silverware they want on the side, and that's the Lee McCarthy Cup. And if were they to get the league after a 23-year absence, I don't think it would matter to them. They really want the big one. So that's for another day.
Yeah, that's for another day. But just before we move on from the hurlers, just on the indiscipline, obviously the first 2 weeks there was an awful freeze given away, and then last week the sending off had a huge bearing on the game. And it's a moment from Shane Flanagan that he'll learn from, but at the end of the day, it would probably prove very costly. It's something Limerick will definitely have to work on.
Something they'll have to work on, and I'm not trying to justify it for 1 minute. I didn't see it in real time. I was in Walsh Park, but we followed the flight of the ball. I saw it back on television. I found it very, very hard to see on the footage. I found it very hard to detect the offence in Seamus Flanagan's case, and in the case of Kyle Hayes, and I'm not being blinkered here now, Jack, in any way, or not being biased, but how you could single out one player in that schmozzle and give him a red card, I don't know. Like there was yellow issued to two, there was a red card to Kyle Hayes, and subsequently there was a suspension handed out to a Waterford defender for the altercation with Kyle Hayes. No matter how many times I look back on it, I find it very, very hard to determine why Kyle Hayes was singled out. And in our advantage point in Waterford, we were actually quite close to it on Sunday, and I honestly thought now, as I say, I'm not blinkered. I honestly thought he was more sinned against than sinning.
Yeah, I suppose it was up for a matter of opinion, really. He does throw the ball up and he does go to strike the ball, and the Waterford player gets in the way, like he probably would have hit it. It was a wild enough strike, like you can see where the referee came from, but the one from Early Daly, the kick on Kyle, and there's 2 punches thrown before Kyle ever throws up the ball. And it's good that it was seen to after the game, because that was dirty, like in fairness. But we won't dwell on that game anymore. We'll obviously have the game against Cork. Look forward to next week. Before we digress onto the camogie and the ladies football, the fixtures for the minor and under 21 championships have been confirmed by Munster GA this morning. We'll start with the minors, and obviously the minor hurlers have an All-Ireland to contend with in July, but they start off in the semi-final, the Munster Minor Hurling Championship. Limerick are against Clare or Cork, who meet on the 14th of July. Limerick play the winners that on the 27th of July in Semple Stadium at 7:30. Then the minor footballers are up against Tipperary in the quarter-final on the 21st of July in the LIT Gaelic Rounds at 7:30. Moving on then to the under-20 championships, we have the hurlers are awaiting the winners of Clare and Kerry on the 19th of July in either the LIT Gaelic Rounds or in Tralee. So obviously if Kerry beat Clare in the quarter-final, that game will be on Tralee. If Clare win, they'll play Limerick in the Gaelic Rounds on the 19th of July at 8:05, and that's a Monday evening. And then the under-20 footballers are against Tipperary in the quarterfinals on the 8th of July in Thurles at 7:30. So just looking at them draws, I know we talked about them recently enough, Matt, but they were good positive draws for Limerick. There's no fixture there that you were really dread going into. Like, to be fair, avoiding Kerry in the football is probably the big one, and then you'd fancy the hurlers with the academy that's in there against anyone. Was there any fixtures that stood out for you?
No. The general feeling is that they're decent fixtures, but I suspect the most relieved people in Limerick at the moment to get this confirmation. First of all, it's great to know that we have a roadmap and that they're back and that the games are being played. But I suspect because Limerick, in minor hurling in particular, are in a unique position in Munster in that they have unfinished business from last year as Munster champions. So I have no doubt that Dermot Mullins and Kevin O'Hagan will be the most relieved men in Limerick at the moment to see that they have a plan, because basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to juggle last year's team with the survivors who will be on this year's team. So at least now they have a roadmap, and there is a bit of a gap because it's the end of the month that Limerick will be involved in the minor championship, and they're involved against Galway in the semi-final. I think it's the 3rd of July, is it, Jack? And the All-Ireland final, which I hope we'll be in, will be 7 days later. So there will be almost 3 weeks so that Kevin O'Hagan can prepare, and his backroom team can prepare their minor charges for their assault on this year's championship. But you must not forget, Jack, that we're going for 3 in a row in the Munster Minor Hurling Championship, which isn't an easy thing to do, and of course which we've never done. Like we've done the back-to-back twice now, but we've never done three in a row. So the fact that the lads have got clarity, I think that's the most important thing coming out of this notice this morning. Now, just looking at the draws, like Limerick will play Clare or Cork. It's actually it's the very same as last year. I think Clare and Cork met in the first round in Thurles last year, and Limerick subsequently went on to beat Cork in the semi-final. So there are similarities there, and it's Tip and Kerry, which, no disrespect to Kerry, you probably expect that Kerry or the Tipperary would win that, and that they will face Waterford in the semi-final. So now, looking at the minor football, Limerick and Tipperary, it's very, very hard to know how the minors go from year to year. It's very hard to determine. Were they to win that, they will face Clare in the semi-final. So they're in a side of the group whereby there is a pathway there to a Munster final where it's one of those years. Most years, for one of the 4 weaker counties, so-called weaker counties, although can there be 4 weaker counties anymore after what Tipperary have achieved in the last couple of years, both at minor, under 20 and at senior level. But there's a pathway there in that Cork and Kerry will potentially meet in a semi-final. So, look, we said that the draws were they were to our liking, let's say. And there's no such thing as an easy Munster Championship game, be it hurling or football. But, they could have been more challenging, let's say, than they are. But now, looking at the under-20 hurling, Limerick are straight through to the semi-final where they play Clare or Kerry. And this will be the 2018 Limerick minor team. It'll be the nucleus of it. But Clare or Kerry, that game is on in Austin Stack Park in Tralee. And if you remember last year, Jack, during the lockdown, Kerry pushed Cork for 50 minutes in the under 20 in Tralee. There was an outside chance for a lot of the second half that there could have been a major shock, and we know that Cork subsequently went on to win the Munster Championship. So on paper it would look as if it could be a Limerick-Clare semi-final, but it's not a gimme for Clare, and that's on at the end of the month. And then we have the football where we just cannot be separated from Tipperary at any level in football now, because we're playing them in the first round. And again, Jack, there is a pathway there to a Munster final, because the winners play Waterford or Clare. You have a semi-final between Cork and Kerry. So, the draws in both codes could have been far more difficult than they are. And I'd be very, very hopeful of a long, happy summer in hurling and football for Limerick.
Yeah, just before we move on from the fixtures, Matt, how hard will it be to juggle? Obviously, you'll have a minor squad that is last year's minor squad all the way up till hopefully the start of July, towards the 10th of July, we'll say. And then you have to get rid of the likes of Adam English and Ethan Hurley, to name a couple, and integrate new players. How will they go about that, do you think?
It's going to be a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem, because in normal circumstances they would get a free run from the beginning of the year to get their squad assembled. Not on this occasion. I presume what will be happening is that Kevin O'Hagan will be working, and his backroom team will be working with those that are not involved in the 2020 squad, and hoping that first of all that those that are involved in the All-Ireland semi-final, and hopefully the All-Ireland final against Galway, and who are still eligible, will come back unscathed, that they won't pick up injuries or anything, and he'll have a full 3 weeks running of his squad together. No, we don't want to be preempting excuses or anything, but he's going to be slightly at a disadvantage. There's no use in saying otherwise, because all counties will probably, they've assembled their squads now. They know what their squads are. They're working with their squads. They're probably getting challenge games for their squads. So he will not have that benefit. He will just have a short, sharp 3 weeks to prepare his side. So, it's a juggling act. It's not an easy one. I'm hopeful that they'll get over it.
Yeah, it's certainly not an easy one, but that's something that we'll look more in depth at towards the games. Moving on to the camogie team, they're both in action on Saturday in Kilmallock. The seniors are playing Galway and the juniors are against Waterford. We'll start with the seniors, Matt, and we'll go through the team. There's actually no changes to the team that beat Clare 2-14-111 last weekend. Laura Neal continues in goals, a full-back line of Marion Quaid, Myrna Kramer and Mairead Ryan. Megan O'Mara is at wing-back, Roshan Ambrose on another wing, and Judith Mulcahy is in centre-back. Midfield pairing of Aisling Scanlon and captain Karen O'Leary. Half-forward line of Cueva Lyons, Deborah Murphy, Sophie Callahan, and then that potent inside line of Anya Cunningham, Rebecca DeLee and Cueva Costello. And there's a positive news among the subs that Niamh Ryan, vice-captain, is back among the team. But before we go on to the Galway game, the Clare game last weekend, a brilliant performance from Pat Ryan's team in their first outing of the season, and I suppose Cueva Costello took all the headlines with 2-6 and 2-4, that coming from play in an excellent display. But just overall, a really good performance from Limerick.
Really, really very, 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 very promising performance from Limerick. Now, we saw Limerick, and as you know, Jack, that the junior team and the senior team have been prepared together. On the previous week, we saw Limerick playing Clare in the junior in the junior league, or Division 3 league, which is Limerick's and Clare's junior teams in Kilmallock. And Clare in the past have been a tough nut to crack for Limerick at any level in camogie, but the manner in which they the manner in which they disposed of Clare that particular day, like, was very, very encouraging. You know, the way they used the width of the pitch, the way they used to move the ball around. I think they scored, what was it? I forget now, but everything that they got, I think it was 216 they ended up with. It was 216, and 214 from play, like, which tells its own story. Now, we were wondering going to Ennis, like, what would be the story last Saturday when they were facing a Clare team who the previous week, you must remember, Jack, really pressed Galway when they went to Athenry. And, like, they must have been, you know, going into the game, saying to themselves, right, we can get back into contention here if we can pick up a win. And like, the display of Limerick in the first half in particular, Jack, was absolutely phenomenal. And the display of Caoimhe Costello, but I suppose it's nothing that we didn't know about Caoimhe, like that what she has in her locker, like, you know, it's just incredible. A fantastic display. And in the second half, now it's wrong to say that it was all predicated on their performance in the first half. That is not correct, because what we saw in the first half was Limerick as an attacking force, playing the same style of hurling and the same style of camogie that the juniors had played the previous week. And what we saw in the second half was we saw the strength of the Limerick defence. When Clare really came at him, trying to rescue the game, and never really looked like making any inroads or any headway at all against the Limerick defence. Now, I honestly thought that the Mervyn Kramer at fullback and Judith Mulcahy at centre halfback formed the spine of the defence. They were immense. And the other four girls, Marion Quaid, Mairead Ryan, Megan O'Mara, and Roisin Ambrose, they responded. Like, there was very, very little doubt at any stage as to who was going to win the game, even in that second half, when Clare had a greater level of possession. But overall, it was a very, very encouraging performance from Limerick. But switching to Galway now, you're switching to it's going to be a step up. There's no doubt at all about that, Jack, because you're talking about one of the big four here now. You know, you've the Galway, the Kilkenny, Cork, and Tipperary, I suppose, now are the big four. So, like, it's going to be a step up. But look, the victory in Ennis, you know, was a major step in the right direction. Now, from the previous week, from the previous week's junior team, you will recall we spoke last week about Anya Cunningham getting 6 points from play. Like, Anya stepped up and was promoted to the senior team, and Jack, she didn't look one bit out of place. Now, she didn't get on the score sheet, but she was involved quite a lot, got on a lot of ball, had good use of the ball, good appreciation of those around her, and certainly is one that's going to be in the senior team for a while.
Karen, it's not the last we'll talk about Anya Cunningham today with the ladies footballers to come. But I suppose, how important was it getting that win against Clare and then having that free shot against Galway this weekend, knowing they're through to the knockout stages?
Hugely important, Jack. Hugely important. After the disappointment of last year's championship, like, it was hugely important. And Pat Ryan said it right from the very outside about the importance of getting a win and how right he was. And like, his reign now has lasted for 3 games. He's got 2 wins and a draw away to Carlow, who play at intermediate championship level. We cannot forget that, who are strictly a grade above Limerick. So, like, he stressed for anyone that wanted to hear the importance about getting wins, no matter how you got them. But by God, they were the 2 wins that we have got so far, and the draw. And I look back at the Carlow game. I watched the entire game back, and it was more of the same. So, like, it's very, 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 very promising. And certainly there were a number of players in Kilmallock in the junior game against Clare that definitely put up their hand, I thought, for the senior. Now, Anya Cunningham was definitely one of them. But I think there were a couple of more that did it in Carlow. Like the performance of Michelle Curtin was absolutely immense. In Carlow, Elena Mulcahy came on as a sub and scored 3 points, all from play. Like, that was a fantastic contribution. And I see that in the team that Pat has named for this for Waterford on Saturday, that she's getting her start at full forward. So look, it's all very, very positive so far, but it's very, very, very much a work in progress. And the first real big test of it is going to come when Galway come to Kilmallock on Saturday.
And who's the more favourite to Galway or Limerick? Would say Galway had the game and a week off and got to see Limerick, or is it better for Limerick, who have that momentum probably closer to the game?
I'd go for the latter, Jack. I would go for the latter. I would go for the momentum. I go for the momentum, and I know it's a home game, and we've talked about this ad nauseum since the lockdown, that home and away, whilst it matters in that you don't have the travel, in terms of when it's played behind closed doors, it levels the playing pitch quite a bit, and it's not the same advantage that it would be in normal circumstances. But the answer to your question is that I would go for the momentum, because like training in the Limerick camp this week must be at an all-time high. They must be bursting in the traps to get out on Kilmallock on Sunday. Both teams, like we have the game with Waterford at 1 o'clock, and like Limerick are already, as you said, Jack, through to the knockout stages in the senior, and they're on the threshold of going into the knockout stages in the junior. Beat Waterford, of course, they're definitely through. Now, there are a number of permutations where they to lose to Waterford. It may not all be lost, because were Carlow to beat Clare, Limerick would still go through on 4 points. But I'd be very, very hopeful. Waterford they were well beaten by Carlow in Kill in the first round, and they were beaten by Clare last week in Ennis, and but we have found we've played Waterford a couple of times in recent years, and found them very, very difficult to shake off, and very, very difficult to get the better of. But I honestly think that Waterford at senior level, even last week, Jack, they struggled against Tipperary. They were 14 points down at half time, and they eventually ended up winning 11 or losing by 11. But and they play Cork in the senior, so like they're struggling a small bit. Now Waterford Camogie is certainly on the up. They have reached the All-Ireland quarterfinals for the last 3 years, but they're up since 2016. Waterford have been. They've never beaten one of the top 4 in that time, which is an interesting statistic. But that's far away now from Limerick and Waterford in Division 3 tomorrow. But I honestly think that the omens are good. Limerick are playing well. Waterford are struggling. Limerick are at home. Limerick's confidence is high. I think Limerick will see out the job there.
Yeah, and just to go through that junior team, there's 2 changes to the team. In goals, Leo Carroll comes in place of Aoife Corbett. Full back line, well, the whole defence is the same. Then you've Megan Ryan, Roisin Mann, Yvonne Lee, Grace Lee, Aoife Coughlin and Shawnee Cunningham make up the defence. In midfield, you've Aisling Cunningham and Stephanie Wolfe. Michelle Curtin, who you mentioned at a brilliant game last week, Alva Larkin and Enya Harrington in the half-forward line. Enya moves to the wing to accommodate Elena Mulcahy, who goes in at full forward and is flanked by Valerie Sheehan and Ciara English. It's a very strong team, Matt. And I suppose, as you said, there's a lot, like the football for the men's, there's a lot of permutations for both sides. I suppose with the Camogie, the senior Camogie team, they're definitely through. But with 6 teams to go through, the 3 groups, 2 of the top 3 will get a semi-final place. And then the other winners and the 3 runners up will get a quarter-final place. It sounds a bit confusing. And then for the juniors, as you mentioned, a win will guarantee their place, but a loss, again, could get them through depending on the results. If you had to call it, can you obviously the senior team are going through, but can they get the win against Galway, and then the junior team, can they get the win to secure their place in the knockout stages?
Can I answer your second question first?
Okay, you can lose it, please, Matt.
I'm going for Limerick to beat Waterford, and I'm going for Limerick to really, really put it up to Galway on this occasion. Now I know that Limerick's record against Galway hasn't been spectacular in recent years, but I'm going for Limerick to reverse that trend. I'm not 100% sure that Limerick can win it, but they will go very, very close to it.
And one mitigating factor for that senior game is if that junior side, and it's shown in recent weeks, the junior side kind of laid a foundation for the senior team, and if they can get the win against Waterford in Kilmallock, it could definitely change the outcome of the senior game if they have that bit of momentum, as you said, working off the same squad.
It would, and just another thing about the junior team, and it can give you a sense of where they're going. Numbers 2 to 10 on the team are unchanged for the 3rd game in a row. That is more than the basis of a settled team. Now, Pat Ryan is in a very, very strong position with regard to goalkeeping duties, in that he has 2 very, very good goalkeepers in Leah Carroll and Aoife Corbett. Neither of whom have each who has played 1 game each. Leah Carroll has played against Clare. Aoife played against Carlo, but neither have put a foot wrong in their games. Now he has moved LB Larkin around a bit. She started at wing forward. She's now moved into centre forward. And Anya Harrington, who was on the bench in the first game, she came in the Napier-Shig. She's from Napier-Shig, and she came in the game against Carlo. She scored 6 points. She was unerring from frees, and Ciara English, who started at full forward, is moved out into the corner now. Ciara from Granaballingary, she got the goal against Carlo, and Elena Mulcahy of Killeedy is gone in at full forward now. There was no doubt in my view, having looked back at the Carlo game. And on her second half performance, she came in at half time in the game in Carlo, that Elena Mulcahy had to get a starting berth on this occasion. And it'll be interesting to see how she performs on Saturday at full forward. So, and I suppose if you talk about a settled team and the senior, what better than the manager giving the team that did so well in Clare last week a vote of confidence, full vote of confidence, all 15 of them. But whether there will be temptations going forward to raid the junior team, that's a decision for Pat Ryan. I suppose it's a dilemma for Pat Ryan. And I suppose from a Limerick point of view, the more of them that will give him that problem on the junior team, the better the junior team will be going. But there are certainly a number of players on that junior team who are definitely putting up their hands for inclusion in the senior squad. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the scenario of John Kiley, the seniors, the strength and depth. It's a good headache to have, and it certainly, as the season progresses and the truncated nature of the season, you're going to have injuries, unfortunately, and it's good to have a strong squad that you can pull from. So just before we move on,
Jack, you must remember here, Jack, that this will tell you what Anya Cunningham achieved. Pat Ryan isn't using any of the junior team as backup on the senior team. They're not on the bench. He's a completely independent bench on the senior team. None of now. I don't know. Maybe some of them are eligible for the junior team. I don't know. But he has a totally independent junior team. And just you mentioned it there at the start about the Limerick bench, and I'm rambling all over the place as usual now, Jack. But how great it is, we can't overstress it enough to see Niamh Ryan back.
Yeah.
What an option to have on the bench, and it's absolutely she's the vice captain. She's a natural leader, and will we ever forget her performance in the county final last year for Bruff? Absolutely inspirational. But an inspirational individual and absolutely fantastic. It's like getting a £1 million player for or a £1 million player. May I know at this stage £100 million player for Pat Ryan to have somebody like of the caliber of Niamh Ryan coming back into the squad.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge boost for the squad to have Niamh there as a replacement, and just it's really good to have a player that quality on the bench, that the players that are starting know that there's someone there that can replace them in an instant. But the juniors start off the day on Saturday at 1 o'clock against Waterford, and the seniors then at 4:30 against Galway. Both games, both games streamed live by Sport in Limerick. Then moving on to Sunday, we have Donal Ryan's ladies footballers, finally get their campaign underway. They play Offaly in Offaly, and then before they play Carlow next weekend. I suppose it's a very quick turnaround for the ladies footballers, just 2 weekends like the senior camogie team. Offaly were very good value for their 316 to 116 win against Carlow last weekend, and just the manner of that score just shows you the challenge ahead for Donal Ryan's team.
Yeah, it would look that there's going to be a defensive. It'll have to be all-out defence on Sunday. They'll certainly have to keep more than one eye on Granny Egan, who was on fire last weekend. She scored 1-8 in the victory against Carlow after scoring 3-5 the previous day for Offaly Camogie in the win over Dublin. Like she in 24 hours, she chalked up 4-13 between the two codes, which was just absolutely phenomenal. I know I'm talking about Offaly first now, but your question leads into it as to where the score came from. And of course, they have Roisin Egan back as well, who would be one of their key players after injury. And they've also Mairead Daly back, who is Gary Daly, the Offaly manager's daughter, who's a top-class player. Now, Limerick and Offaly met last year in a tie, and it ended in a draw. Now, how much you can read into that, I would suggest very, 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 very little. There's no doubt at all about it. It's going to be a formidable Offaly side, a formidable challenge for Donal Ryan, especially as it's his first game, because Offaly will have the benefit of a game away from home, which they won, which they chalked up a very good score. They'll be high in confidence, and momentum will be with them. Now, looking at the Limerick side, it's a sort of a settled Limerick side in many ways, Jack, in that there's a big carryover from last year, but there is one gaping gap in the side, is that Cathy Mee, the 2018 All-Ireland winning captain, is taking a year out, and she'll be very, very big boots and hard boots to fill. So, but having said that, it looks an experienced side. Now, on the plus side, you have an All-Ireland winner in 2018, Christine Reedy, coming back into the side, and that will be a big plus. She'll be coming back into the defence. But there's quite a lot of experience in the Limerick side. We saw last year, like the McCarthy sisters and forming the spine of the defence. You had Maeve at full back, and you had Niamh, who's the captain, had a great year at centre back last year. As the year went on, like you had Roisin Ambrose and Caroline Hickey forming a very, very strong midfield partnership. And like the Limerick team, really, we cannot define it by the loss to Fermanagh, because Fermanagh had 3 or 4 goals practically before the whistle was blown nearly. They got them so quick, but Limerick came right back into it and pushed them. And I would rather like to think that is the second half Limerick of the game against Fermanagh that defines Limerick. But there's no doubt it's going to be a very, very tough challenge, Jack. There's no point in underestimating it now. In the full forward line, we have Lauren Ryan has come into the full forward line, who is a new girl from Adair. We have Amy Ryan inside there, who was had a great year last year, and was scoring goals for fun. And very, very interestingly, it's very, very good to see a player of the caliber of Iris Keneally back on the team, and she's back at corner forward. It's a very, very strong full forward line. And just outside them, then we have Anya Cunningham, and we've spoken about Anya in terms of her prowess at camogie. She's one of the great dual stars that the county has at the moment. Andre O'Sullivan, quite experienced All-Ireland winner with John the Baptist in hospital, a double All-Ireland winner actually in junior and senior schools A ladies football, and beside her John the Baptist colleague Katie Heelan. So there are a lot of positives there on that Limerick side. It's their first day out. They don't have the advantage of a game. I honestly think, because I can second guess your next question. Do I think they win? They'll win. I think they'll give a very, very good account of themselves. I would be surprised if they beat Offaly. I think there's momentum with Offaly. I hope I'm spectacularly wrong, Jack.
Yeah, and just, I know you've gone through the team there nearly in full, but just to run down the team there before we continue. Sophie Hennessy in goals, Yvonne Lee, Maeve McCarthy and Leah Coughlin make up the full-back line. Then you've Maeve McNamara and Christine Reedy wing-backs, and Niamh McCarthy at centre-back as captain. Caroline Hickey and Roisin Ambrose, as you mentioned, midfield. Anya Cunningham, Andrea Sullivan, Katie Ely make up the half-forward line, and then the inside forward line of Lauren Ryan, Amy Ryan, Iris Keneally. It's a very strong side, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of turnover from players last year. And you say we spoke about Anya Cunningham being a dual player. So is Roisin Ambrose. So is Yvonne Lee. Yvonne Lee is playing very, very well at cornerback with the junior team now. Grace Lee, also a junior, also a dual player, is named among the substitutes. So there are four girls there who are going to have a very, very, very busy time for the rest of the summer. But speaking briefly with Roisin Ambrose in Clare last weekend, they're up for it. Roisin is up for it anyway. So yeah, I'm sure they'll be fine, injury aside. I'm sure they'll get through all those games with flying colours. But you said there Offaly have the momentum. But if Limerick can perform as they did in the second half against Fermanagh last year, do Offaly have enough to put them off, or is that a way Limerick can win?
That'll be the big question. It might be enough to take Limerick over the line. And what a strong position to be in playing when Carlow visit Doon the following weekend.
Yeah, and just in a three team group, it's obviously more difficult for Limerick that they have nothing to fall back on. Is that something that'll be on the mind, Donald Ryan, or will they just focus on Offaly from the beginning?
They can do nothing else, Jack. They just have got to focus. It's the next game, what's immediately in front of us, or what's immediately in front of them. There's no point about thinking about Carlow, thinking about permutations, out the window, all that sort of stuff. We have a game of football at 2 o'clock on Sunday in Bodenamona, O'Connor Park in Tullamore, and you have to go up and win the football match if you can. That'll be the sole focus of Donald Ryan and his management team this week.
Yeah, and the ladies footballers are the last senior team we'll have seen in action. Obviously, the hurlers were the first; they got a draw. But then the men's footballers and both camogie sides got a win in their first game of the league. So could that be a good omen for Donald Ryan's team?
Now you're searching for omens, Jack. You're searching for omens. I hope you're right.
Yeah, because it's
definitely been... Do you know something, Jack? Sometimes you are right. And I hope this is one of the times you're right and I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's certainly been a positive start to the season for Limerick and all codes, and hopefully the ladies footballers can continue that. As I said, that game is Sunday at 2 o'clock. It's live on the LGFA website on their in-player page. It's on our website for anyone wondering where to find it. So we have 4 games to look forward to, Matt. As I said, the footballers at 3 o'clock on Saturday, the junior camogie team at 1 o'clock on Saturday, and the senior camogie team at 4:30. And then rounding off the action is the ladies footballers at 2 o'clock on Sunday. We're cautiously hoping for 4 wins and progress for the footballers and the junior camogie team into knockout stages, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll know by the time we meet again next week, Matt. But many thanks for your contribution again today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, you're welcome, Jack.
Impression again, we get out with what you put into. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the work out today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Curry. Curry leading the charge of the left brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.